Good afternoon and welcome back to this week's episode of Since I Was Young, a podcast dedicated to all things Heart of Midlothian. We rewind to August 2014. Osman Sow scores a winning goal for Hearts at Ibrox, and just 4,054 days later, we have experienced that once again. A lot of things have happened since August 2014. Scotland, the people of Scotland voted no on an independence referendum. Brexit reshaped the political landscape of the UK, and the COVID pandemic changed the world. But in that time, we've been through a lot, let's say that. But Hearts have finally broken the hoodoo of a win at Ibrox. And that took place on Saturday, the 13th of September 2025. So like I say, just the 4,054 days on from that Osman Sow last minute winner. What a wait it has been. But we are back to discuss the weekend's action today, and I'm delighted as ever to be joined by John. Before we do get stuck in to this week's episode, please do remember our social media links can be found in the description down below. Head over there, give us your likes, your thoughts, your comments, and just let us know how you're feeling after what was a pretty impressive performance from the Derek McInnes Hearts side. Certainly that statement victory that many people kind of use that phrase about a manager when they come into a new job. They need a statement win. And I think it's quite safe to say that Derek McInnes has that statement win. But as I said, I'm delighted this afternoon to be joined by John. How are you getting on, mate?
Good. It's been a busy week for me. So it's nice to get a wee sit down on a Monday afternoon and talk Hearts. We've got a great game to discuss today. Brilliant result, as you've said. It's been since August 2014, that famous day in the first game of the championship season of 14-15. I was in Aberdeen during that game, playing a baseball game against the then quite new Aberdeen Oilers baseball team. It was at their old field, the original field, and I had no idea that we had won that match until after the game finished. And I looked at my messages, and my ex-Glasgow Comets teammate, who's a Motherwell supporter, you'll be delighted to hear, Alan, Gary, shout out to Gary, he had messaged me saying, "What a result for the Jambos." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "You just won 2-1 and you won it with the last kick of the ball, basically." So that's what I remember about that day. The game this past Saturday, rather, it was slightly less glamorous for me. I was working. I work in a student accommodation, and it was check-in weekend, so I had no way of watching the game or even really keeping up with the game because I was too busy. So I was absolutely delighted when I saw the score. I think it was basically yourself and Ewan that kept me up to date with it as best as you could.
Yeah, it was. It certainly was quite something. I'm at the moment, and obviously people that listen to this podcast and have done so for quite some time know that I frequently work night shift. So the weekend fell right between my night shift patterns. So I was kind of sound mind, but not quite really. When I woke up and saw, I basically watched the first half and was very impressed, and then I had to nip out and do a few jobs and bits and pieces, and then came back and thought, okay, we won. Like it was quite a feeling, as I say, one that I've still probably not quite processed at this point today, and what it means and how important it is, etc. But we'll dive into that as we go. The place that is best to start is the place that we usually start with these things. When the lineup dropped at 1:45 on Saturday afternoon. Now, I was looking at it thinking it looks like a back three or maybe a back five. And then that sort of seemed to be the way that a lot of people spoke about it. But then news started to filter through that it was going to be a 4-4-2 and that we were going to see Harry Milne line up on the right hand side of a four-man midfield with Oisin McKenty right back behind him. I don't know what it is. Hearts managers going to Ibrox and playing players in weird places. We saw Garang Kuhl play central midfield in a not too distant game at Ibrox that still remains in my memory to this day. So yeah, there was, when I saw Harry Milne at right midfield, I was thinking that's interesting. I don't quite know how that's going to go, but it obviously worked, as we'll talk about as we go along. But were there any other sort of surprises for you? Of course, we saw a goalkeeping debut as well.
Well, first thing being first, you'll remember that when you posted the lineup into the Since I Was Young group chat, my response was, "Why the fuck would you try Milne at right midfield in this of all games?" And I did definitely have Darren Cool in mind when I posted that. I was completely baffled by that selection when you had Kizaridis on the pitch, who would have been quite capable of playing on the right hand side, I'm sure, and plenty on the bench that could have played on the left side or even replaced Milne on the right. I was very surprised by the 4-4-2. Like when the initial lineup was announced, I was pretty convinced, like yourself, that it would be a back three with wing backs, maybe like a 3-4-1-2 or something like that. Because that's kind of more similar to the system that we've played up to this point. And when we've played 4-4-2 or even 4-3-3 in competitive games previously, it hasn't really worked all that well for us. It seems like the system that has gotten the best results has been that back three. So I was quite baffled by it. Obviously, Big Shvolov getting a start, I was very pleased to see that. He's a guy who comes to Hearts with a lot of pedigree, a lot of experience, over 200 games in Bundesliga. And I think he, introduced himself quite well. Made a couple of really nice saves. He always looked very composed, very calm, never flapping at anything. He had a very solid debut. There was that one slightly embarrassing miss kick quite early in the game, and it almost kind of gave you pause to be like, "Oh, have we not found a new goalkeeper after all? Is this going to be a Joel Pereira situation?" But no, like
Oh
he
God.
settled in quite quickly, and as soon as he did, he was looking good. McKenty, I have to say, he deputised quite well at right back. Um, and it was good to see the Braga Shankland partnership continue. And obviously, that midfield pivot of Beningame Devlin, you're always going to be onto a winner with that. They have such a great
Yeah.
understanding together, the chemistry they have as midfielders. They work really well together. To see them both fit and to see them both playing at their best, it's always a joy.
Yeah, definitely. I think the other one to sort of mention was Kizaridis getting a start finally. People have been crying out for it for a long time for him to start games, and I'll be honest, there were points where he frustrated me, but I think he's just going to be that sort of player. Um, he tried to do a little bit too much when he got into the final third, and rather than do a simple thing, he was maybe just not quite quick enough to do the simple thing, so would take his time and end up having to overcomplicate it. But there's no denying his pressing and his energy, along with Braga, and really the whole team. Really, the pressing that they put in from the start, particularly in that first 45, was a massive part as to why we ended up obviously coming away with a win.
It was a vast improvement on the last few games where we have given teams too much space. There were one or two occasions when Rangers got a lot of space, and the one that really sticks in my mind is that moment where Tavernier was essentially able to run from right wing back into the middle of the pitch, about 25, 30 yards out. He was given far too much space, but we seem to have cut that out to an extent, and we were certainly able to defend or the line much more steadily and much more confidently this time around. I was very impressed by how the kind of Milne and right midfield actually worked in practice. It was almost like he was like a second right back, almost like he was playing
Yeah,
right wing back with a right full back behind him. Essentially,
yeah,
kind of, I guess, a defensive winger type of setup. I guess a defensive inverted winger, if that's
yeah,
even a thing. And it weirdly worked. He did a great job tracking back, and he served as sort of a link from that
mm-hmm.
weaker right back position to the sort of more attacking third. It was a tactical decision that was taken by McInnes that I think a lot of people would have looked at and scratched their heads and been like, "What is he doing?" But that's why Derek McInnes is Derek McInnes, and we are not Hearts manager. He is. He
Yeah.
came up with that idea, and it worked out.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, I just had a little bit of a coughing fit there. I think Derek McInnes spoke after the game about it, and he said, they basically asked Harry Milne, and they'd obviously worked with him during the international break, which is a big positive of having that break before such a big game. They asked him about what he felt about playing that position, and he apparently said that he'd played there a few times as a kid, so he was happy to just give it a go. And yeah, he did really well. Like you say, he did really well. I thought the kid he was up against in the first half, that Mikey Moore, didn't get any change out of him at all. And this is a player that is a youth prospect at Tottenham that has quite a high ceiling by all accounts. But Harry Milne just kept him quiet the whole day. Well, for the first 45 when he was on, The boy that played fullback for them, Megoma, I like the look of him, but again, he and I think it was Gassama that came down that side as well after Mickey Moore went off. They got no change out of McEntee and Milne, as you say. And McInnes mentioned that he was talking about the physical aspect, and he was talking about the two of them and their aerial ability and the way that they can just disrupt, basically. And that's kind of what they did down that side. It was a bold tactical decision, but like you say, it was one that worked, and it was one of those decisions that had it not worked, people would have been critical of Derek McInnes for that, because obviously, as I said at the start, we've seen players playing in positions all over the pitch. When we seem to go through to Ibrox, it feels like we like to experiment. And I feel like it's more about stopping Rangers doing something than it is to our benefit. And you could say that the Milne and McEntee right side was that, but it also carried a threat going forward, as Harry Milne does.
Absolutely, yeah. It was like a hybrid of like a defensive wing back, but also that outball option. And Harry Milne, I think one of the things that's been most surprising about him since he joined Hearts, obviously, we're more used to seeing it on the left side, is just how two-way he is. He is a complete wing back. I think we were expecting a sort of serviceable defensive replacement when Penrice wasn't available when we signed it back in January, but he is a far more complete package as a player than I think we could ever have anticipated. The fact that he's able to do that on both wings, it just raises his stock even more. And I think you had mentioned in the previous episode that that would be an area of strength for Rangers, and that it was going to be very difficult for us to contend with them unless we picked the right back. We've ended up doing one better, and we've sort of improved
Pick two.
the outball in the process. Yeah, it's been a fantastic move by McInnes, just a tactical win for him. Really, it's good to see. Like, it's good to see him thinking outside the box, and he's able to adapt. It would have been ideal if we could be starting Borchgrevink in that situation, but it's quite understandable why he's not there from the beginning.
Yeah.
I don't think he even featured today.
Don't think so, no.
Ideally, we would have had another right back in, but of course that wasn't the case, and we covered that in the last episode. So McInnes has taken what he's got at his disposal, and he's made the best out of it, and he's done so in a very innovative way, I think.
Yeah, I think the one of the points that I'll have to sort of make before we kind of talk about the game itself is obviously the situation at Rangers at the moment. We came up against them at a very good time. I don't think there's any denying that. Rangers are certainly at this present moment in, well, a crisis, really. They have a manager that the fans have not warmed to, didn't really want in the first place, and a team that just seemed to be a little bit all over the place, not really sure what they're supposed to do. Obviously, Russell Martin is a young manager, but he is quite experienced for his age. He's had quite a few roles already. But this appears to be a role that it's not working. And, it'll be very, very interesting to see how it unfolds. Obviously, at time of recording, he's still in a job. The Rangers board have apparently said that they're not considering his position at the moment, which is good news for the rest of Scottish football. But yeah, I felt quite bad for Russell Martin, but I also feel like Ibrox and that toxic environment, we've had that at Tynecastle previously under previous managers, and teams have come to Tynecastle and taken advantage of that. So for us to go to Ibrox and do that was quite something. Was quite interesting, and I do, as I say, I feel like we got them at a very good time. I have to be honest, because I don't think Rangers have got a particularly bad team. I just think they are a team with no direction at the moment, which doesn't help. And obviously the off-field stuff with Raskin and all the rest of it. There's lots of layers to Rangers, and obviously this isn't a Rangers podcast, but I just kind of wanted to put that in there before we kind of dive into the action itself, because there's no denying that the atmosphere at Ibrox made a huge difference. The natives were restless right from the start. They cheered their players as they came out the tunnel, but then after that it was kind of like, right, we're here to make a point. And yeah, it certainly helped us. But I think from a Hearts player perspective as well, that's a big bonus, because Ibrox is a massive stadium. It'll be the biggest stadium that a lot of our new players will have played in, let's be honest. So for that atmosphere to not be positive, would be helpful, because when you talked about Alex Schwolov making his debut, there was a part of me that thought this could be a big game. And I know he's played in the Bundesliga and there's big stadiums, big atmospheres over there, but to come into a game like a trip to Ibrox could have been quite daunting for him, but it certainly, thankfully, didn't turn out to be the case. But in terms of the action,
if I can just jump in, sorry, Alan,
of course,
regarding that, I think if Schwolov was maybe 6 or 8 or even 10 years younger, maybe, but he's an experienced goalkeeper. He's, I think, about 30, 32-ish.
Yeah, I think so.
He has played much bigger fish in much bigger ponds than Rangers at Ibrox. I think he is the perfect guy to have between the sticks for his first game at Ibrox. So if we had been bringing in Harry Stone or like one of the younger prospects for their first game in a Hearts shirt, that would have concerned me far more. But I didn't really have much in the way of concerns about Schwolov going in. I felt that when we brought him in, he was exactly the right guy to get for that particular reason. Like, he has over 200 games in Bundesliga under him. He's played against some of the biggest clubs in the world and some of the greatest strikers that have ever played the game. So a trip to Ibrox, I don't think is going to be all that daunting to him, with all due respect to Rangers and what they mean to Scottish football. If anything, it would probably have been quite the opposite. Bit of a letdown for some of the new arrivals, because the reputation that comes with going to Ibrox is one of the crowd will be on top of you for the first minute. You will be pressed harder in that game than you will in any other. And Rangers are one of the top 2 teams in Scotland, and they've gone there, and what struck me was how disorganised Rangers looked. They had no identity whatsoever to them. They looked sloppy. They looked knackered. And we're only a month into the season. It was almost like watching Hearts last year after that dreadful pre-season that we spoke about. It was like they look out of shape. They look like they can't be bothered. They look frustrated with the support in the way that they're being received. If anything, if I'm a new signing like a Braga or a Schwolov, I'm probably standing there thinking, what was the big deal about Rangers at Ibrox? Like, it's not been a particularly difficult first game for them.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, though. I think before we kind of touch and actually dive into the action of the game itself, I think one point that I've got in my notes was the Derek McInnes sort of pre-match stuff that he was coming out with, and I think I maybe sent it in the group chat as well about, we've heard so many managers, so many Hearts managers talk about going to Ibrox, talk about going there and playing our own game, going there and talking about not being phased, not being worried, doing your own jobs. And a lot of the sort of sentiment from what McInnes said we've heard before, but it doesn't come with that substance of actually going there and doing something and actually seeing it through and getting a result. So, my favourite line was Derek McInnes saying we need to play with some bollocks, and I thought, do you know what? Let's not sugarcoat it. That's exactly what we need to do. It is a mentality thing. Like I said in at the intro, 11 years to have not won a game at a ground for 11 years is laughable. Let's be honest. And we've seen better Hearts sides go to Ibrox and not get anything. We've seen Rangers teams that are in bad form, we go and visit them and they find a win. And prior to the game, obviously, I kind of spoke about my predictions online and stuff and on the socials and things. And in as much as I had a little bit of confidence because of how poor Rangers are at the moment and how good we're playing, there was also that point of, we've seen this story before. Rangers could quite easily turn up today and get a result, or not play particularly well but get a refereeing decision and win the game. So yeah,
Rangers had several very strong chances to score. Schwolov made a couple of fantastic saves.
He did.
They hit the woodwork once or twice as well. Like a Rangers team that is firing on all cylinders and is playing with confidence and that has a bit more organisation about it. A Rangers team, I dare say, under a better manager, would have probably put a couple of those away. We would be talking about a very different story coming out of the game. Although Hearts, I think, on balance, played better than Rangers did on Saturday, it could be argued that we were lucky to leave with a 2-0 win on a couple of different fronts, which I'm sure we're going to get into when we start talking about goals and stuff. But they were bereft of chances, although they were probably the worst Rangers performance against Hearts that I've seen in recent memory. They were never out of the game. They were always one or two passes and a better shot away from evening things up a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, we can just dive straight into sort of the first major point of discussion, that being the goal from Shankland. He did the same thing as he did against Aberdeen. After he scored, he didn't celebrate. He turned to his teammates and was like, "It's a handball. It's a handball." And yeah, listen, I've watched it lots of times. He does control it with an arm. There's lots of different things that I've heard, and just to rattle through them as to why I think it was given rather than disallowed. It hits the t-shirt line. I don't know whether that rule is still a thing or not, because I'm sure I've read if it's above the t-shirt line, then it's not a handball, and it does hit sort of his upper arm, so there's an element of that. The other point that I heard was after he controls the ball, he plays it forward into Braga's path, and it takes a deflection off the Rangers defender. Um, so that then becomes a second phase of play. So the handball is not relevant in the actual goal, so to say. But let's be honest, it's a handball. And I think for Shanklin, when he scores, and don't get me wrong, it's a fantastic finish and somewhat uncharacteristically, and the thing that I really enjoyed about the goal was Shanklin running beyond Braga. You know, we've seen Braga be the guy that does the running, but overweight, disinterested captain Lauren Shanklin decided to put the burners on and get past Braga, and Braga plays a brilliant pass to him, and it's a great finish. It's the type of finish that Lauren Shanklin can do. It's just the no thought process, first time back across the goalkeeper. I think it might have even been his weak foot as well.
Yeah, he's left. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just it was such a nice finish. But I know obviously when he scores and he's turning to his teammates going it's a handball, he's fully expecting it to be overruled, and I think quite a lot of people probably did as well. Maybe not if you were in Ibrox watching it live, but I think certainly from the pictures that I saw of the game, it looked a pretty blatant handball. So as I say, I don't know the rules, etc., but the points that I kind of ruled off would be the potential reasons why it was allowed.
Shanklin stated to the media that it did in fact hit his hand. He point blank admitted after the fact that it was a handball. He kept playing, and we ended up scoring the goal because that's what you're trained to do in that
Yep.
scenario. I think that the referee and somehow VAR have missed it, have just made a massive, massive fuck up there. It's a fuck up that has benefited us, and I'm certainly not going to complain about getting the rub of the green, but if I'm a Rangers supporter in that moment, I'm going to be very frustrated. Russell Martin had every right to be frustrated because it was a handball and that goal probably in balance should not have counted. We got very fortunate there. I think the goal was
Yeah.
coming. I think that it wasn't exactly something that happened against the run of play, but yeah, I can see why if you're like a Rangers supporter or part of the Rangers club, why you would be asking questions of the officials on that occasion because it was quite clearly I felt a handball.
Yeah, yeah, and I think Russell Martin probably would have been more raging about it at the end had his future not been as much of a question as it is. I think that's kind of taken all the headlines and all the sort of
Yeah.
newspaper articles rather than the VAR decisions, which we'll hear about over the next few days, I'm sure. But yeah, it's one of those that if it happened against us, you'd be absolutely raging. Um, Another point of interest to note was the Rangers disallowed goal. I'm kind of rattling through them here. I know we had chances in between those, and we've kind of spoken about how well we played in the first half. So I feel like there's not really too much to say on that. But the Rangers disallowed goal was another one that I felt we maybe got a little bit fortunate. I know the ball comes in and Swallow kind of flaps, kind of punches, kind of gets something on the ball. I think it's the big guy Ausgard, the Rangers forward, who I was actually quite impressed with during the game. He was the one Rangers player that I thought, yeah, he's got something about him. He does put hands on the keeper before the ball is played in, but it's soft. It's very soft. Rules of the game, though, again, and I feel like I'm going to keep using that phrase to try and justify the VAR and the referee. Rules of the game, the goalkeepers do get protection in those situations, and they have done for years. And some people say they get too much protection, some people say they don't get enough. I felt like we got away with one on that.
I fully disagree. The referee 100% got the disallowed goal correct. Um, on two levels. There were two obstructions on the play. As soon as Asgar's arms go up toward the chest of Shvolov and he blocks him with those arms, that is an obstruction. You can't do that to a goalkeeper. That is immediately grounds to call off the goal. That is probably the one that was called. Suter also obstructs Shvolov's
Yeah.
view quite intentionally as the shot comes in. Both of those count as obstructions, and both of them are grounds to disallow the goal. There was absolutely zero controversy to that call. I feel that the people who are trying to frame that as one that got away from Rangers are missing, something that should be quite obvious.
No, I don't disagree with you, and I think you're right in terms of the disruption and the sort of the players that were piling in around Swallow. But my point is more that we've seen that happen before and nothing gets done. But I do like the fact that the referee. One thing I will say about him, and it's becoming somewhat of a theme for me, which I'm not quite sure how to feel. But talking about referees in a positive note, Stephen McLean, he did well with the decisions he had to make because, like we said, with the Shanklin handball, he didn't give it because he then gave VAR the opportunity to go back and say, actually, it's not a goal. With the Swallow one, he could have quite easily given Rangers the goal, and then VAR could have went back and went, actually, it's not a goal. But he chose to say, no, that's not a goal. And then obviously the VAR officials have said, well, we can't find any reason or any grounds to disagree with you, therefore it's not a goal.
Yeah.
And I think
when you look at McLean's positioning as well, during that phase of play, he was in the absolute perfect spot. He was like his positioning as a referee was fantastic. I found it's the first time I've ever found myself complimenting a referee on his positioning, but he did his job fantastically well. I felt on Saturday there were a couple of decisions that I feel like fundamentally he got wrong. Obviously, the obvious one being the Shankland handball. I do feel that should have been called a handball, but overall, in terms of how he, like you say, the confidence that he had in his calls, he was willing to make the calls and he was willing to have VAR check them, and VAR agreed with him more often than not. So I felt like he had a solid game, despite the fact that there was. It's funny to say, but he did make one or two wrong decisions, but he made the decisions in the right way. If that makes sense.
No, I'm with you.
Makes sense, but yeah.
No, I'm with you. It's that's kind of my point as well, that he didn't allow VAR to referee the game for him. He made the decisions, and it was like put it to them.
Yeah,
he put it to them to say, well, if you disagree with me, tell me why. And they couldn't find a clear and obvious reason to disagree with him, so the decisions stood as they should have, and fair play to him for that. Obviously, halftime, I was buzzing at halftime. I can't lie. We had Rangers pinned in their own half for the first 45 minutes and they couldn't get out. John Suter was having Claudio Braga-shaped nightmares, and I'm sure he probably has every day since.
Kabangu living under his bed as well after those last 15 minutes.
Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. But at halftime, I still, like we said at the start, I still had that feeling of this is only 1-0. We've seen this story before. As bad as Rangers have been and as good as we've been, it's still only the first half. We've played brilliantly. We've done everything. We've done our jobs, and Rangers, to be fair, didn't really have much of a sniff in the first half. They had a couple of moments, but we just controlled it, and it was a professional performance from us, which you can't fault anyone for. And at halftime, I'm sitting there going, "This is good, but it's not over." We had to expect a response from Rangers in the second half, and I think it's fair to say that we got that in a sense. They made changes at half time. They brought the boy Rothwell on for Bannon as well in the second half, just at the start of the second half. A substitution that the Rangers fans didn't seem to agree with, but I actually thought was the right call.
I was wondering about that. Has Joe Rothwell made some embarrassing, calamitous mistake or something like that prior to this game? Because they were not happy, to say the least.
Yeah, I know. I didn't quite get it, and I think on the context of the game and having watched it all, I think Rothwell came on and actually made a positive impact, and then obviously got injured and had to come off. But that was one that baffled me. But we made a few changes ourselves as well as the second half went on, because it was clear that Rangers had a lot more of the ball in the second half. They had a lot more rhythm and they were trying to sort of make things happen. But our defensive effort was what came into the fold in the second half. I thought Halkett put in one of the best centre half performances I've ever seen.
Yep.
He was
Him and
winning
Finlay, to be
everything.
fair.
Yeah, he was winning everything in the air. I think Finlay was a little bit more unassuming. I think Finlay just went about his business quietly and did well with it, but Halkett was winning everything. Every ball in the air, he was heading them away. There was one that he headed away that got as far as the halfway line.
I got a
It's
sense, if I can just jump in there, actually,
of course,
I got a very strong sense from the Halkett Finlay partnership that they knew each other's strengths and weaknesses, and they
yeah,
knew each other's. They knew Halkett was winning absolutely everything in the air. That meant that Finlay could focus on being the mop up guy and clearing things away, or being there to take the ball away from Rangers on the ground.
completely.
It was they both kind of had their own tasks and roles that they worked with, and they worked really really well together.
Yeah,
They were very organised the whole game,
yeah,
and they were, I think, the primary reason that the majority of the chances we saw from Rangers were from 25 to 30 yards out, because
absolutely.
they just couldn't get through that Halkett Finlay wall.
Yeah, definitely. And I think even like we spoke about McKenzie at right back with Milne in front of him. One we haven't spoken about was Stephen Kingsley at left back, who I think deserves a lot of credit as well. I think he, by a lot of people, had been written off at the start of the season as somebody that we could upgrade on and somebody that we could phase out, etc., etc. He played very well against Rangers. Didn't have as much to deal with as the opposite side of the pitch, but what he had to deal with, he dealt with very well until he had to come off with an injury, which is typical at this point. Thankfully, I don't think it's too bad. I think he just went off as a precaution. But yeah,
It seemed like he
the,
took a bit of a knock
mhm,
during a challenge. It looked more like a 50-50 initially at full speed, but he
yeah,
definitely came out of it the worst. He seemed like he took a bit of a knock on his knee.
mhm,
Hopefully it was just shithousery and he was wasting time. It looks like he's not going to be. It's not like an injury where he's going to have to miss any time. It looks like, but
yeah,
he certainly looked like he was moving a bit more gingerly toward the end when he had to come off.
yeah. It's one of those, and Derek McInnes spoke about it after the game about the sort of low block defensive approach that we had in the second half, and he also mentioned about going to Ibrox. You're not going to win a game with a 45-minute performance at Ibrox. You need to play the 90 minutes.
No,
And the first half, we were front foot attacking, pressing them at every opportunity. The second half was much more pragmatic defending. Still having that out ball and still having opportunities when we could get it forward, but it was more putting in the graft. And when you spoke about Halkett and Finlay, Benny and Cammy being another two in the midfield that were brilliant, and even up front, Shankland led the line brilliantly when he needed to. He was there. Derek McInnes described his performance as a masterclass, and I don't think anyone could disagree with that. But Rangers, they threw everything at it. They threw everything they had at it. They brought on Chermiti, a player that they've spent £9 million on, who hasn't scored really. I don't think he's scored a professional goal for Everton. Granted, he's not played that many games, but I'm talking about Lauren Shanklin masterclass, and then I'm talking about a striker that Rangers spent £9 million on in the summer. Plus, they brought in Bojan Majovski from Girona on loan, another player that was anonymous due to our defensive
yeah,
quality. It's just funny how things work out, isn't it? All summer long, Rangers media had been linking our captain to Rangers. And then when he goes to Ibrox, he scores 2 goals and silences them all. So it's just funny how these things work out. But as the second half went on, in as much as Rangers had a lot of possession and they moved the ball a bit better than they did in the first half, I don't know about you, but I was never worried.
no, same. We handled it at every turn. Like I said earlier, like the only semi-concrete chances that Rangers had were from distance. Um, Obviously, not counting the disallowed goal, which again, I'll reiterate, was correctly ruled out. Um, the vast majority of their attack was. It seems like their game plan from the start of the game, or from the start of the second half, was pass the ball around sideways at a very slow pace, just inside their own half, try and find someone in space, and then that person would just take a hit from distance whenever they got an opportunity. I'm not really quite sure what Russell Martin was trying to do with that. I'm not sure whether it was that or the players just having no confidence, no clue how to implement his game plan, but they looked sloppy and they looked poor going forward. And so I was never really all that worried, considering how good that centre half pairing and how well Benny Beningame and Devlin worked together. And we also defended from the front in spells as well. We pressed them very well when they were on the ball in their own area. There were periods where it was 3 Hearts players to 1 Rangers player who was on the ball, and it was just outside their own box. It was almost like seeing the reverse of what you expect to see at Ibrox. Like you expect to see Rangers doing that to teams, and teams kind
Yeah,
of bedding in. But they never really posed much of a threat, with the exception of those shots from distance, which, like I said earlier, if they were playing with more confidence and if they had more cohesiveness in their unit, they might have put a few of them away. But also, you factor into that, Shvolov had a couple of really fantastic saves as well on his debut.
yeah, he did.
It was a pretty complete performance from Hearts. Certainly a case of the old cliche, a game of two halves. Like first half, we pressed them, we attacked, we got the goal, we went in with a lead, and then in the second half, it was very much contain it, don't let them get back into it, and then eventually, of course, we put it away with the second goal.
Yeah, I mean, on that second goal, I feel like just prior to that, we had a couple of substitutions made. Thomas Magnuson came on for Kizaridis, and Claudio Braga went off for Elton Kabangu. Kizaridis and Braga getting a rest after their just absolute relentless pressing and running and just putting in the yards, which was great to see from new players coming in and knowing what they have to do and just doing it. But Kabangu came on, and Kabangu's been a player that so far this season we haven't really seen a lot of. Probably we've seen less of him than we thought we would, based off of how he was last season. But that shows you the level of recruitment that we've made during the summer, that a player that did relatively well for us last season can't get in now. But Kabangu came on and put in a shift. We changed the system at that point, went to a back 5, I believe it was, or a variation of back 3 with the wing backs. Harry Milne switched back to his natural left hand side position, and that's where the goal comes from. The penalty call. He gets forward in a way that we've seen Harry Milne get forward before. He just takes the ball and just takes no shit and runs with it. And I think that power and that energy and that athleticism at that point in the game, considering the work he'd put in up to that point, is just a massive indication of how good a player Harry Milne is. The penalty call, he gets into the box and Diomande puts a leg out. I've seen lots of people saying it's minimal contact. I've seen lots of people saying there's no contact at all. I've seen lots of people saying Harry Milne makes the most of it. Maybe all of those things are accurate. However, put yourself in that position. Harry Milne is running at full pace. It's not going to take a lot to knock him off his feet in terms of contact. Diomande could have stepped right across him and body checked him and wiped him out. He would have fallen down in the same way. A little tap and he goes down. It's momentum. And yeah, Harry Milne goes down, and as I say, it was a soft bit of contact, but it's still a penalty.
I would say that I completely agree with that. I think there was enough contact to justify calling it a penalty. And like you correctly suggest, he's cut in and he's running at essentially top speed. I think to make a point to that, I think it's testament to Milne's conditioning and the work he's put in over the summer that he has that engine in him. But to get back to the penalty call, Diomande is a big and a strong player. He has very strong legs. It doesn't take much contact for him to send a relative to him, a smaller player to the ground, especially at that speed. I do feel that there was contact. Like it was difficult. It was frustratingly difficult to get a good enough angle of the foul to actually make a concrete guess as to whether there was contact or not. It did look initially like there was, and then they showed an angle on Hearts TV at least that it suggested maybe there wasn't so much contact. But then again, you see another angle and it's like, well, it looks like he does clip him slightly. Whether Milne has made a meal of that or not, it's still a foul. And I do think that he was moving it with enough speed and with enough pace that it wouldn't have taken much more contact than that to send him to the ground in the way that he went down. Correct call. I feel like VAR checked it. They gave the penalty. I don't think there's any controversy there. It's the same with the Rangers penalty claim when there was a claim for handball. You shoot the ball at someone's hand. It's not a handball these days. Like
Yeah.
it's not like his hand wasn't out here. His hand was down at his kind of waist. So anyone that was calling for a penalty there was sort of being a wee bit cynical, and I think they were on a hiding to nothing because there was no real legitimate claim there.
Yeah.
There wasn't any protest from the Rangers players really either when the penalty was given to Hearts. I think that they were quite aware that there was just enough contact.
Yeah, totally. That was the point I was going to make. The lack of protest kind of confirmed it for me. And Diamande sort of walks away a wee bit, sort of sheepishly, knowing that, do you know what, the contact I made on him probably was enough to send him over.
There was more
Shankland.
contact there than there was from Pakajabi on Suso Santana in the 2012 Scottish Cup final. That's for sure. And it was definitely deeper into the box than that foul was.
Yeah. Yeah.
That should be the bar, really. If that's a penalty, then the Diomande foul on Milne certainly was.
Pakajabi, there's a name. One of the best
He could
fullbacks
have won
I've
the
ever
cup,
seen.
but he fucked it up.
He did indeed, and the rest, as they say, is history. But Lawrence Shankland taking the ball for the penalty, it's just inevitable. Mr. Inevitable is what I labelled him after the game. He takes the penalty, and to be fair, Butland makes a decent save, however, parries it out, and that's all Shankland needs. No other Rangers defender reacts quickly enough. Shankland gets there, puts it away, sprints across to the Hearts support, who absolutely adore him, and he clearly absolutely adores them too, which is why he's still here. Let's be honest, we know why Shankland stayed at Hearts rather than taking a much more lucrative offer elsewhere. But yeah, that just put the seal on it, and obviously the mass exodus that followed from Ibrox as the stands emptied, as Lawrence Shankland wheels away and knee slides into the Hearts support. Just a glorious sight.
Absolutely, yeah. Credit to Butland for saving the penalty, but as one of the Hearts TV commentators, I want to say it was Rob Borthwick, pointed out correctly, you want to send that wide in that scenario because because of how far he's dived to his left, he's left the majority of the goal wide open, and Shankland very brilliantly places the shot in the bottom left corner. From there, he puts the ball as far away from Jack Butland as possible, and with the rebounds. And like he very accurately pointed out on his post on, I think it was Instagram, if penalties don't count, score more rebounds. And I must admit, I was very pleased to see Lawrence Shankland in a Hearts shirt grab the Rangers branded corner flag at Ibrox and pose to celebrate with the Hearts fans. That was a nice thing to see after all the media bullshit the last 2 years about Lawrence Shankland and how he was destined to be a Rangers player and how it was his dying wish to put on the royal blue jersey. To see him that fired up about beating Rangers and about scoring a brace at Ibrox and celebrating with the fans and enjoying that in a Hearts shirt, it was a great thing to see, and I think he's just getting started. He's going to have a big season. I feel like. I think I might need to already. I think I already might be on the verge of having to concede defeat on my prediction of whether or not he gets to 100 this year, because he looks like he's enjoying his football, and that's a scary thing for opposition teams to have to look at, is Shankland enjoying his football and motivated.
I completely agree, and I think we've spoken about it a few episodes of this season so far. I think it's down to the fact that he's got players up there with him that are helping him. It's not just on his shoulders to do everything.
I would actually argue, Alan, like you pointed out earlier, they're not just helping Shankland, they're making him better. Yep. He's doing the running. I think we have to point out his physical conditioning, his fitness levels this year are so much better than they've been. And I think that is motivated by knowing that he has that talent around him in the final third. Having Braga up there beside him is only going to make Shankland a better player. He's not just there to make Shankland's life easier by picking up some of the slack. He makes Shankland even better than he is.
Yeah,
and that's massively only going to continue if these two can keep playing together and keep building that partnership. And I think that's an amazing thing to point out as well. I mean, if you look at the starting formation from Hearts to 4-4-2, you look at centre back, you've got a partnership there. You look at central midfield, you have an established partnership there. And if you look at the front two, You have an established partnership up front. That is what we're
Yeah.
seeing at Hearts that we haven't seen enough of in recent years, is an established partnership, an established first choice group in each of the sort of main areas of the pitch. And it's paying dividends, 4 wins from 5 to start the year. Joint top on points, only trailing Celtic by a goal after their 2-1 win yesterday.
Yeah.
It's only going to get better if they can keep playing together and they can keep learning from each other and pushing each other to improve.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's funny you talking about partnerships on the pitch. Like literally on my notes, I've got key partnerships worked. That's I've got 3 words: key partnerships worked.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I don't know whether you've read my notes or not, but yeah, that was a point I wanted to kind of make as well. But
Mm-hmm.
we've spoken about Derek McInnes since the start of the season about him changing systems, changing personnel. I feel like that performance and that result at Ibrox needs to be that jumping off point. And I'm not saying that every week Cammy and Benny need to start together, every week Shankland and Braga need to start together, every week Halkett and Finlay need to start together, but having those relationships helps. Obviously, every game is different and every game will require a different shape and a different system. And the fact that we were
Yeah.
able to change from a 4-4-2 into a 3-5-2 into a 5-3-2 or whatever it was at the end of the game, that tactical fluidity is massive as well, and having players that can do that is huge. We very nearly saw a 3-0 with the headband wearing Icelandic midfielder Thomas Magnusson. The ball gets lumped up to Kabangu, and minutes before that, the ball gets lumped up to him and he doesn't run after it. And Derek McInnes was on the touchline going mad at him, and I'm like, this is the 96th minute, and your manager's shouting at you because you're not chasing after a ball. That's mad. We're winning 2-0.
Yeah.
Like it just shows the
Aye.
demand and it just shows the energy that McInnes wants. But then the ball goes up to him again, and Suter's probably got, I want to say, 5-10 yards on Kabangu at that point. Kabangu just puts the burners on and he gets there first.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't know if
He
Suter has
done Suter
burners.
up like a kipper, man. Like, he absolutely embarrassed him. It
Yeah,
was.
massively. I think it's funny. Sorry to kind of interrupt you there. I just wanted to make a quick point about Suter. I love Suter in a Heart shirt. I thought he was a fantastic defender. However, I saw somebody post something on the forum, Twitter. It might well have been. I can't remember. They spoke about when Suter left, and there were a lot of people saying, "Oh, it's a big loss. It's a big loss." This one person, and I can't remember the name. So if they listen to this, please make themselves known. They mentioned something along the lines of, "When Suter left, I was just glad they didn't go for Halkett instead." Because I'm not saying Halkett's the better player, but if you look at them now, Halkett made his
Well,
150th
yeah.
appearance for Hearts at Ibrox,
Yeah.
which is baffling because Halkett's been here forever, but it just shows you the level of injuries that he's had that have held
Yeah.
him back so much. And Suter himself has had injuries as well. But yeah, Suter was done at every moment. Kabangu just wiped him out and then played the ball across the box, and Magnussen just appears out of nowhere, and I love that. Like I still don't know what Magnussen is. I still don't know whether he's a Peter Haring or whether he's a
Um,
you know ball box breaking midfielder that will get in and score these sorts of goals. Not
he's
seen
both,
enough of him
Adam.
to. If he's
Peter
both,
Haring and Egert Jonsson had a child, and it's Thomas Bent Magnussen. He's both those things.
if he is both, then we've peaked. That's it. Jamestown recruitment have
Mm-hmm.
peaked. If he comes in and is that man. But even talking about midfielders, the performance that midfield put in was without our record-breaking signing as well, who's injured at the moment. So how
Yeah.
does a £2 million Brazilian midfielder get into that? It's a whole thing. But
It
Magnussen,
reminds me, on a slightly lesser scale, but it reminds me of when Miguel Pallardo came in to Hearts.
yeah,
He was there alongside the partnership of Gomez and Brabin, and they started that season really, really well. And so I remember when I was playing Football Manager that year, I was always struggling to get the three of them into the system because they were all sort of both Gomez and Pallardo were too similar to playing a three together. And I feel like that was an issue that actually bore out in real time. Like Pallardo never really ended up having the impact that it had. No, by now,
yeah,
in no way am I suggesting that Agiu is going to have a similar experience at Hearts. I think that when he gets going, he's going to be a massive deal. But it's going to be difficult for anyone to break into that too. The one, I guess, caveat that I would attach to that would be that Benny Berengami, obviously, he's had his injury problems. He's not a particularly durable player, so you do have to manage his minutes a bit more so than Devlin's. Fortunately, I think Devlin has shown adaptability and is able to play alongside basically any of the central midfielders that we have. But if both Benny and Devlin are fit, how do you not go with those two?
Yeah, it is quite a thought. And then obviously the full time whistle went. Like I say, Ibrox was empty aside from that little corner of Hearts supporters that were just living the dream, living their best lives. Like I said at the start, 11 years since a win at Ibrox.
Yeah. The travelling Hearts
The
support were brilliant, by the way.
Yeah,
They were in full
massively.
voice the whole game, and it was all very positive. Like I think away Hearts crowds have had a bit of a reputation at times, and we've both had words about it
Yeah,
ourselves. They were impeccably behaved. They sounded great. We heard the Hearts song ringing out with about 10 minutes left. Even Laurie Dunsire mentioned that on the Hearts TV commentary. It was like things you don't expect to hear, but you love to hear. Like the Hearts song is
yeah,
ringing out around the Ibrox. It was just
yeah,
wonderful. They were in great voice, and it was great to
yeah.
hear. And they were given a performance that matched that energy.
Completely agree. Completely agree. And obviously, you kind of touched on it briefly. The win took us top of the table for one night only. After Celtic winning at Kilmarnock with a last minute penalty. I'm not going to criticise the system because I feel like we got a little bit of a handshake from the system ourselves to win at Ibrox, so I'm not going to say too much on that.
Yeah.
But there was interesting things said after the game. Chris Boyd on Sky talked about Hearts and talked about how poor Rangers were. And he said there was only one team out there today that looked like a team. There was only one team out there that looked like they wanted to win it. There was only one team that looked organised and had a plan, and that was Hearts. And, all the media talk at the moment is that Hearts are doing something. Something is building. Something is happening. And, it was funny. I watched the Hearts Standard guys after match reaction, and Joel Sked was asked, "Are we general title contenders?" And Joel was jumping up and down, flapping his arms about, basically, trying not to get carried away. I will not get carried away, but it's difficult to not be. And I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that after 5 games of a league season we're going to be general title contenders, because let's be honest, there's a long way to go. There's a January window to come where teams will strengthen if they need to. If Rangers have a different manager, they'll need to throw money at him or whoever that may be. But it's a nice feeling when you mirror it to last season and how miserable and how much of a disaster last season was. We as a fan base and we as a club deserve what is happening right now. And Derek McInnes is a huge part of that. The players are a massive part of that. The turnaround, not even just in personnel, but in mentality and standards. That is what stands out to me from that Ibrox result. The discipline, the mentality to see that through and go, like you said earlier, for these new foreign players to come in and go, what's the big deal about going to Ibrox? That's the mentality. Lawrence Shanklin said it after the game. It's just another 90 minutes. That mentality is what's been missing for such a long time. And I'm not saying we're going to go to Parkhead and do the same thing. Let's be honest, it's a long season in front of us. But that shift of mentality from, oh no, we're going to Glasgow, we don't do well here, to it's just another game of football. If we go out and play how we know we can play, we've got every chance. And that is what I'm getting carried away about, not the prospect of us winning a title, not the prospect of us being a title challenger, because we saw Aberdeen last season do similar. The start that they had, the media were writing them up as a team that could challenge Celtic, and then obviously the wheels fell off and we all know how that ended. But there are so many positives right now, and I just don't know how to feel about it. Like it's new, it's unusual to be this positive.
Yes, I think the last time that we had a remotely similar feeling about Hearts was 20 years ago, funnily enough, in 2005-06. We know how that ended. George Burley lasted about another 6 weeks from where we are now and was gone. And then the season just went completely mental. We finished second and we won the cup. It was our most successful season in recent memory, probably in living memory for a lot of folk. So it's great to have that around. I think what's different now is that we have a lot more of a stable setup, from the squad to the bench to the footballing department of the sort of operations of the club, and that's the most important key here. Tony Bloom's name was being sung to the tune of "Daddy Cool" at one point in the stands. Graham Jones needs to be right there as well when you look at people to point the finger at and say this guy has done his job over the summer. Everything seems to be going right at Hearts. You know, we've put everything in such a position where Lawrence Shanklin looked at the offer from Hearts and he listened to Derek McInnes and he said, "I'm going to choose to stay," when he could have gone elsewhere and gotten a lot more money by all accounts. People want to play for Hearts. You know, like there are players who've come like Braga, Agiu, who's cost £2 million, and these guys aren't saying, "Oh yeah, I'm using this as a stepping stone." They're saying, "I can't wait to get started at a club the size of Hearts and help Hearts win football matches and try and go even further than that."
Yeah.
There's such a great feeling around the camp, and hopefully it's going to continue. We're going to drop points, we're going to lose games, but for now, it's a near perfect start, and it's just such a night and day difference from last year. It's night and day of difference from anything we've seen since 2005, 2006, with the possible exception of 14-15, but that was obviously a much different scenario. We're in the championship, and we were sort of expected to be in the top two that year.
Yeah.
This has been a bit of a shock, even to the most optimistic of Hearts fans. Let's just keep riding that. I feel like with regards to whether or not we're title contenders, I have the same answer to that as I did with the was the transfer window a success last time out. It's too early to say. Let's play Celtic. Let's see how we get on against Celtic. Let's see where we are after a round of fixtures before we start to say either way. Like, everybody's a title contender technically still. We're only 5 games into the season. Some teams have played even less than that. You know, it's only mid-September. There's no such thing as a favourite at the moment in terms of like statistically. You've got your sort of empirical favourites of like, well, Celtic have been the best team in Scotland for, so they'll be favourites and blah 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 blah. Rangers were probably expected to finish second comfortably. That's not looking likely at the moment, but all it takes is for them to click. If Martin goes, they bring the right person in, they could go on a 20-25 game unbeaten run and end up, you know, they could still win the league.
Yeah.
If Celtic go into meltdown, you know, like it's not something that's out of the question. So I don't think it's right to get carried away and say yes or no. Either way, let's just enjoy it for now and take it a game at a time.
Completely, yeah. And the most frustrating thing, obviously we've talked a lot about positives, the most frustrating thing for me right now is that we're not in action again until the 27th of September when we take on Falkirk at home. Like I say, you want that positive momentum to continue. You know, when you're winning, you want to keep it going. You want to be playing again. Obviously, we're out the League Cup, which is why we're not playing again. We're not in Europe, etc. So that's why the gap is there, and that's what it is. But you know, hopefully the players stay in the training ground. The positive momentum keeps going. The positive feeling keeps building, and I think it should. I don't think the bubble will burst anytime soon on that front. And Derek McInnes mentioned that there'll probably be a bounce game during the week. Just to get minutes and legs, obviously, because we'll need those. Falkirk, it feels very strange to say it, but it'll be a tricky one. Tynecastle, obviously, our home ground, we should be looking to win that game relatively comfortably, and I feel like we've got the tools to be able to do that, but Falkirk might make it quite difficult. It might well be a case of attack versus defence, and it's up to us to try and break them down. But Falkirk have got some threats as well. I'm going to predict we're going to win the game. I'm not going to give you a score prediction because I haven't really thought about it. I'm still on a high from a win at Ibrox, to tell you the truth. But I'm going to predict we're going to win the game, and it's probably going to be quite a tricky afternoon, though.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they'll make it easy. I do think that we will comfortably beat them, though, if that makes sense. Like, I think we will beat them by 2 or 3, but it's not going to be a walkover. I do think that I'm kind of ambivalent about the week off, to be honest. I don't know. I'm in two minds about it. On the one hand, I think it is a blessing because if we were to beat Rangers 2-0 this past weekend and then immediately we face Falkirk, I feel like we might still be on too much of a high from that. And there's a risk of overconfidence. Whereas I think that extra week allows the extra time to get that Rangers result out of the system and reset and go again. and it gives Derek McInnes more time on the training pitch to really drill home the importance of, be confident, yes, but don't become arrogant or overconfident. Don't go into games expecting to win. Go into games expecting to have an opportunity to win, and make sure you take your opportunities when they come. So that's where I think it is a benefit, but at the same time, you do kind of also want to get right back in about it. A lot of these players might just be chomping at the bit to get on the pitch and try and improve on that result. Because, like we've talked about, particularly with Alexandros Kiziridis, footballers, they get their match sharpness from reps. They get their match sharpness from playing football matches. So they're going to be wanting to get on the pitch, especially in front of a packed out house at Tynecastle, which is going to be in fine voice and in a great mood after the result at Ibrox. So yeah, it's kind of one of those things that I'm in two minds about. But I do think we will comfortably beat them. It will not be a walkover, though. It's not going to be as high intensity as most people are probably expecting. We'll need to take our chances because Falkirk will make it hard for us.
Yeah, I think it'll be difficult. I think it's one of those I'll confess I've not really watched too much of Falkirk since they've been promoted, but certainly in the Championship they played a nice brand of football. They played sort of good, quick attacking football. So if they come to Tynecastle and believe they can do that, then we could be in for a big victory. But I don't know whether they'll be naive enough to do that. They might take evidence of teams that have come to Tynecastle before and sat in and defended and been that hard to break down sides. So a lot of it will depend on how they set up and how they start.
We will also need to defend as well. We need to defend just as well as we did at the weekend and make that the standard. We're very guilty at Tynecastle of not defending all that well. Like, we have been quite lax and leaky at the back. I do feel like Xander Clark was a part of the problem with that. I wasn't shy about that the last episode. Kind of feel bad about it, to be honest, because I do like Xander, and I think that on his day he's a good keeper. But like you very correctly pointed out earlier in the season, Alan, he's a confidence goalkeeper, and his confidence is shot at the moment. He does not seem to have recovered mentally from the injury issues that he's had yet. Whereas I think having Shvolov between the sticks, and if we keep that Halkett and Finlay partnership together, or maybe Kent comes back in or whatever, like, we need the defence to be as tight and as organised as it needs to be at Tynecastle, because we've been guilty of I mean, that's how we ended up drawing against Motherwell in a game that we probably should have been expected to win. So that's the last thing we want, is to be leaking an early goal to Falkirk and then we're chasing the game at any stretch. We need to be on top of things.
Yeah, and I think that's probably as good a place as any to wrap things up this week. Please do let us know your score predictions in the comments down below. Check us out on our social media channels. As I said at the start, all can be found in the description. It's just been a nice day to sit down and talk about Hearts in such a positive way. Long may it continue. Long may it continue. As I say, I mentioned it briefly there, we don't play until a couple of weeks' time. So in terms of next week's episode, we'll play it by ear. We'll see what happens. We may well bring you some extra content, or we may well just take a bit of time to digest everything. But we will be active on the social channels, as we always are, because I have nothing better to do in my time, apparently. I'm joking. That's a lie. I love interacting with all you people, and your contributions and feedback is always appreciated, as I always say. But yes, time to take a breath and enjoy a win at Ibrox. And let's hope that we don't have to wait another 11 years for it to happen again, and that the standard has been set, because I don't think I could deal with that. But yeah, as ever, thank you, John, for joining me this afternoon, and thank you for listening and watching. Find us on Spotify as well. I'll remember to mention it this week. But yeah, we'll take it from there, and see what happens. All the best, folks. Bye for now.
Cheers, guys. Thank you. Bye-bye.